Leilani Simon's trial just came to an end and she was found guilty on all 19 charges. So if you're not familiar with the case, Leilani reported that her toddler was missing in October 2022. So it's only been a couple years later, but she has officially had her trial. After the police conducted a very thorough search, she was the only one that could have had something to do with his disappearance, and she was promptly arrested. Many days later, his body was found in a landfill. He was only 20 months old, and it's a horrific story. So I think the jury did a good job getting it right on all 19. Her main lawyer ended up talking to Court TV, so we're going to watch a little bit of that and see what we think.
As the lead attorney for Leilani Simon, Martin Hilliard. Good morning, Martin. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning, Ms. Grant.
So tell us, I understand that you did talk with your client, Ms. Simon, over the weekend. Any updates you can share with us on her?
I mean, she's obviously disappointed in the verdict. I mean, we haven't gotten a sentencing date yet. As I do with all cases, she's going to appeal and file a motion for a new trial. So, I mean, it's, you know, initially it was a shock, as it would be for anyone.
Sure. What about her other two children? Can you speak to what's going to happen with them now?
My understanding is her mother has custody of those children, and there's a defects case going on with that, and my understanding is that's still working its way through the court system. So,
okay, gotcha.
That's all I really know about that.
Sure, no, understood. Let's talk a little bit about her decision not to testify. Certainly acknowledging, that is her right. The jury could not hold that against her. Of course, a lot of people was, very curious about what she may say if she would get up there. Let's take a look back together at that moment.
I've been given plenty of time by my attorneys, notified weeks ago about this.
Do you need any time to talk with him in private about this?
No, ma'am.
All right. And so do you personally wish to testify or not?
I do not.
Martin, were you at all surprised at her decision not wanting to testify, or did you think that she might?
No, I was fairly certain she wasn't going to testify. It's something that we discussed at length leading up to it. There was a question about the manner and method in which Quentin died, and we knew the state was going to make a big deal about the statements that were made during the investigation, and she ultimately decided that she just didn't want to add to anything more to the state's case and chose not to testify.
Sure. Certainly a smart decision that she made there. A lot of people, of course, just wanting to hear from her, but not the best thing legally, as you know, Martin. You mentioned some of the statements that could kind of come back, to haunt her, so to speak, if she were to get up there. During one of the interrogations, she seemed to concede that if she did something to baby Quentin, if she would take responsibility, if that was the case. Let's look back at that moment. Martin, would you speak to this piece of evidence, please? Because many could watch this and interpret it as perhaps an admission of guilt there.
Well, that's how the state definitely tried to play it. The reality of it was, though, that was part of, she made a number of statements, and that particular statement was later in the investigation and after a lot of poking and prodding by the state. So if it was really just, if I did anything, I would take responsibility for it, but it wasn't really a concession. I know it seemed that way in taking the excerpt out, that's the way it would seem, but her position was, as she said, that she would take responsibility if she did in fact do anything. And that was much of a piece of a much bigger, longer interrogation.
Gotcha. Martin, if we could talk about Daniel Youngkin. He became a really key witness for the state, as you know, even claiming that Leilani told him at one point to make some false statements to investigators. We have a look back at that clip. Let's watch it now.
Do you remember telling him that when you woke up at 3 a.m. that Leilani was asleep?
No. Well, if I did, then that's probably something she told me to say.
Okay. And I remember telling him Quentin was okay at 3 o'clock.
Probably based on what she told me to say.
Martin, how key to the state's case was Daniel Youngkin in your view?
I think he was a key witness for the state. I don't think he came across as likable as they would like him to. To be quite frank, the evidence was that he was in the room, he was high, he'd been doing drugs, the other children were in the room as well. And if it wasn't Leilani, it had to be him. And honestly, I'm still not convinced that either one of them did anything to Quentin. I understand the jury's verdict and we have to accept it for what it is, but there was just other evidence. But he was definitely key to them securing a conviction, that's for sure.
So tell me, what other evidence are you referencing, Martin?
Well, when the police officers first responded on October 5th, there was vomit, an overwhelming smell of vomit, according to Sergeant Stewart in that room. And there was vomit in the pack and play. I referenced it in my closings. It came out through Detective Lemons. It came out through Sergeant Stewart. And the one concerning thing for me was, Mr. Youngkin never one time mentioned that. It doesn't necessarily indicate foul play, which is what I had said. If we have to offer a theory, there are other theories other than something was done to Quentin. But it was important for the state to have Danny testify in the manner and method in which he did, and he was more than happy to do it, as you know from him doing the hotel audio and video recording and the wiretap.
So, Martin, what's your theory on what happened to baby Quentin?
It's exactly what I said in my closing. I honestly believe that these two were doing drugs, that the baby either got hold of the drugs or had some sort of other medical emergency. And no offense, drug addicts are gonna drug addict, and they one and or both of them may have done something to cover it up. But again, it's a theory. It's just as good a theory as, for no reason she killed her baby. Like I said, we respect the jury's verdict, but the reality of it is there's just as much evidence one way as there is the other of how Quentin Simon died.
It's all about the advocacy, as you know, and you had very tough facts to contend with on this one, and did a fine job representing Ms. Simon. Attorney Martin Hilliard, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on the program today. We hope to see you again sometime.
Thank you very much, Ms. Grant. I appreciate it.
So it's interesting that her lead attorney says that either she or the both of them probably covered up the fact that the toddler had died. It's pretty telling since that is her lawyer, but that's what he's decided makes the most sense. They are planning on a retrial, he said, which is not a surprise at all, but I have a feeling it's going to be really hard, even with another jury, to not convict her of all 19 things. For that to happen, the case would have had to be very compelling. So I highly doubt they'll go to another trial and have a different result.